Yeah, what's going on, guys? It's Shano over here, and what we're talking about is the old debate as far as overhead cam or push rod or overhead valve or dual overhead cam. And we're just going to go over a few things. Now, if you want to watch the whole video, the link's right there as far as if you want to hear this guy go over all the explanation. But we're here to talk about it. We're just going to watch it as we're talking about it. And it really goes down to, I think both can be very reliable as far as overhead cam and push rod. Both can produce power. Both can. I mean, you have to go back to who really designed it and made it, and the quality of the engine. As far as one is more dominant or one is more is better than the other, I think it goes down to, besides the build quality. Obviously, push rod is just a simple setup. But it still has its drawbacks. Obviously, overhead cam, um, it's a more complicated setup in a sense because and it really goes down because of the timing chain. Not really as far as really where the cam is, and where in some cases like the Nissan 240SX, because very simple setup. So it is simple, but the only big difference we got going on here is one has a push rod, the cams, and like the setup. But as far as the delivery of opening that valve, so some people are like, "Oh, push rod all day. They'll always last. They'll always keep going." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a very simple setup. They can last, but you still have wear and tear, and it really goes down to the rods, the lifters, stuff like that you have to replace." Now, I prefer a overhead cam setup, especially if it's high quality. Obviously, it's engine, Toyota, so forth, yada yada yada. As far as building a really good engine, Nissan used to, and I prefer dual overhead cam, and a lot of people do. Why? Because they're known to rev higher. They're known to you can run. A lot of times there'll be a 4-valve engine if it's dual overhead cam, which does allow more airflow into the engine, yada yada yada. Also, the technology that you can do with a dual overhead cam, you simply just can't get from a push rod. Push rod is obviously more old school, and even though that they have some technologies as far as the Hemi, multiple displacement shutdown, yada yada yada, MDS systems, stuff like that have failed. And that's where I kind of, there's a limitation. If you want just a solid, reliable engine, as long as it's well made, very simple, a little bit more compact as far as the top end, push rod. And you can't really go, there's no really wrong thing there. They've been known to be very reliable, especially the older ones where older days where they knew how to build engines and stuff like that. But as far as my choice of engine would be overhead cam, as long as you just do the proper maintenance, 100,000 miles plus even 150, depending on the engine. You really do want to do a time and chain kit, maybe swap out some lifters, some rockers, or whatever the engine may need. Usually it's just a time and chain kit, in particular on certain engines. But I mean, either way you go, you're going to have wear and tear. And things just need stupid boat. Get on my face. And really, it just depends, because every motor on the planet, every engine on the planet, will say very well built engines. At a certain point in time, it's unless you baby the crap out of it, you never floor it, you drive it easy, you do. I mean, you're spot on. I've seen 1,000,000-mile vehicles with the same engine. They've been out there. I think there was one F-150 that I forgot what engine it had. It might have been a diesel. I'm not sure, but I think you can find it on YouTube. But it has like 5 million miles on the engine, like from like proper maintenance on the same engine. And the guy just drives every day. He drives nice, and he drives dogs back and forth, racing dogs. There's a whole story about it. So engines can go the distance no matter which one you pick, as long as there's proper maintenance and they're built very well. But again, I lean towards dual overhead cam. And I understand some people it's like a fight between them. It's not as reliable, stuff like that, which is false because there's been plenty of engines out there, plenty of overhead cam engines that have dominated. The biggest failure, in my opinion, is not either the overhead cam or the pushrod. The biggest failure, in my opinion, is belt-driven engines. Like, besides the overhead cam department, belt-driven engines, which I'm very surprised that Ford uses in a 3-cylinder 1.0 liter turbo. Horrible decision to go back to a belt because it's just a cheaper thing to do. It does make the engine more quiet, but belts are known to snap. They're not very reliable. They can go out as early as 50,000 miles, even earlier than that. Sometimes I've heard reports of 10 to 20,000 miles of belt-driven engines, and the belt snaps, which destroys the engine, especially interference engine. So belts, in my opinion, are completely out. I do not like belt-driven engines. I think it's the worst thing that was ever created. I understand certain things that were good about it, but it's just an X in my book. To worry, especially an older engine. Yeah, I put a new time belt in there. You just don't know. It's a rubber belt. And I know they have new technologies as far as certain metals that now they're in the belt, like higher quality belts and stuff like that. But it's just a big question mark for me. I've had belts, brand new belts that have worn quick, 10,000 miles and stuff, and it's already got cracks in it and that. So I'm not a fan of the belts. But yeah, so in my experience, as far as working on cars, or working on, whatever engines I worked on, is that I think timing chain is easier to work on as far as just like if you have to do certain maintenance to the top end of the engine, you don't have to tear the whole entire engine apart. See, with pushrod, if you have to get to a lifter, you literally have to remove everything up front. You have to remove just everything, the cam, like you literally have to go like rip the whole motor apart to get to the guts of the engine. So even though it can be, again, I think back in the day it was more reliable, even though it can be a very simple setup and people can swear to them, they know what I'm talking about as far as ripping the whole engine apart. Now with overhead cam, it's just a simpler setup as far as getting to, if you need to get to a valve spring, whatever situation you have to get to. It's everything is up top and up front. So it's just covers at that point, and very rare. If you have to change a head out, that's a totally different department. That's like, it's a totally different department. Maybe you can't get the exhaust manifolds off. They're broke. The bolts break. That happens on older vehicles and stuff like that. And it's just easier to change the whole assembly out. But that's where I look at is that I love overhead cam. I still love pushrod, but as far as just, I think it clicks a lot of departments that I love. Now, in my opinion, I think that they never went the one route that I wish they did. And it was something like the old Bigfoot truck with its very rare mountain motor, which nicknamed the Cammer, is the guy literally switched out the timing chain and put in gears, which you can find in the old original Sherman tank. The way, if you actually looked up at the engine, the Sherman tank engine, they actually put they had rods that drove the cams, which were on top, to the crank, and there was rods with that were geared. So it was just spinning rods that were geared, very easy, 1, 2, that was it. So there is simpler, when I see that, I think that's why didn't we ever use that? Why did we still have the chain there? Why didn't we just have gears that were with a cover over it that's obviously lubricated? It would have just been a lot easier. Maybe there's certain reasons behind it. Maybe, who knows? No one really knows, because it's not really popular, and the only person that really did it was just like somebody that, especially the guy with the Bigfoot truck, he did it himself. He's like, but he explained how reliable it was. You don't have to worry about anything about the timing chains, and even pushrod has a timing chain. It's just a lot smaller, and they also have been known to break. So again, it really just goes down to the build. Sorry, guys, got cut off there. So it really just goes down to the build. I mean, it could be a discussion back and forth, like I hate this and I stick with that, and that's great. So whatever you want, and that's the thing. It's whatever you want to build. It's whatever you prefer. But so I think one is better than the other as far as what you can do with it. Not just reliability and stuff like that. But again, that really goes down to the person that built it or created it or whatever. But I think dual over cam is just is definitely more capable of, just there's more to do with it as far as technology. VVT, whatever, VTech, you name it. Even Chevy has a system where they can adjust the valves better in that department. And Pushrod, just, it really just there's not much going on there as far as, I think it's just good, like a good reliable engine. But I think it also falls as far as you can make a lot of horsepower, or you can just have a good V8 to tow with or something like that. So I think those simple departments is where it stays, or just drag racing or something like that. But as far as new technologies, saving fuel, lower RPMs, all the stuff that you've heard from dual overhead cam or overhead cam setups, is that's where it wins. That's the part where it wins. That, not saying that it's less or more reliable. I'm just saying that's, as far as technology wise, we can do a lot more with dual overhead cam. And I do, in a lot of ways, I do prefer the sound of an overhead cam engine than a pushrod. If you ever heard both engines, you'll always have like a lower sound when it comes to pushrod, and when overhead cam, you'll always have this higher, more burbly, crackling, racy type sound from an overhead cam engine. And I do prefer that sound better. GT350, I mean, any type of car that has I would say not a 4-cylinder, but has a V8 or a V10 or something like that. I mean, it just sounds, I mean, not saying a pushrod can, it doesn't sound good as far as like a V10 or something like that. And they do, they still sound good. But there's just something to me about that overhead cam sound that trumps it. Instead of having that low bobble sound, it has that high, rich, like racy sound. And I always love that. Plus, they're just known to rev higher. Not saying a pushrod can't. Usually, depending on if you go, like I say, NASCAR or whatever else, they've been known to get the RPMs up there. But still, like overall, overhead cams have been known to have a higher rev range, higher pitch, higher sound. Which, in a lot of cases, the Mustangs always sounded great. So that's my take on pushrod and or overhead valve or overhead cam or dual overhead cam. Is that I wouldn't say one. It's whatever you lean towards. It's been like an old debate, and I just want to say whichever one you go with or whichever one you like, that's great. That's absolutely wonderful. And again, the real difference is it really is just going to go down to build quality and which one can do more as far as today's engines or something that you like to prefer to work on. But the only category I see as far as winning is that overhead cam has more options for 4 valves. It's possible maybe for a pushrod to have 4 valves, but that's the usual setup. Overhead, 4 valves or 3 valves or whatever, and just more technology as far as how you can control those valves, and then of course the sound and stuff like that. But it's a lot, again, everybody has their flavor of ice cream. So one's not better than the other in my opinion. It just goes down to personal preference, not including the technology department. We're just going down to straight basics. It's just preference at that point and who built it. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Nice talking, nice stopping by. I'll put down in the comments down below what you prefer, pushrod, overhead valve, or dual overhead cam, maybe single overhead cam, anything overhead cam. And this is Shane O. I'm going to get out of here.